Hamas is shifting arenas after being utterly defeated in the Gaza Strip and trying to re-establish itself in Judea and Samaria using operational knowledge and advanced weaponry. Terrorist operations have already intensified with a brazen shooting attack on an IDF checkpoint north of Jerusalem on Tuesday, which left 2 soldiers dead and several others wounded. We'll share the details of that attack with you. But it's not just these increasing attacks in Judea and Samaria. It seems that the Hamas terrorist organization has not understood who they are dealing with and what motivates us. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani has all the details on the Netanyahu-Trump meeting, which among other things dealt with neutralizing Hamas and eliminating the possibility of a nuclear Iran. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, the Hamas spokesman declares talks have begun for the second phase of the hostage deal. At the same time, Hamas is trying to get closer to Russian President Vladimir Putin and presenting civilian hostages as soldiers. Meanwhile, the IDF is strengthening its positions in Syria while Turkey is trying to take control of Syria's airspace. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met on Tuesday with interim Syrian President El-Julani to discuss the establishment of 2 Turkish Air Force bases in central Syria. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 487 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias in Iraq, and the armed Palestinian terror groups in Judea and Samaria. All of them are taking their orders from Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, which are the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. If you want to receive daily Boots on the Ground reports from Israel, please subscribe to TBN Israel on YouTube and stay tuned to the truth from Israel. Our mission is to share the truth from this land and unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem, because this is a spiritual war. In this report, I also want to give you a chance to be part of something very powerful. Israel is rebuilding after unimaginable destruction, including thousands of acres of forests that were lost to fires. But together, we can restore what was destroyed because of all these terrorist organizations. So stay tuned to find out how you can make a lasting impact and help renew the land of Israel. You don't want to miss this. During the past month of January, the IDF has operated across Judea and Samaria to restore security, eliminating about 55 terrorists, including those involved in attacks where Israeli civilians were murdered and terrorists who were on their way to carry out additional terrorist attacks. Additionally, forces arrested approximately 380 wanted terrorists. In just the past few days, security forces have also captured large stocks of weapons, including rifles, pistols, and numerous explosive devices. The security forces will continue their operations to thwart terrorism across Judea and Samaria while ensuring the security of Israel's citizens. However, on Tuesday morning, a horrific terrorist attack occurred in northern Samaria. According to the IDF, the terrorists arrived at night at the entrance to an outpost near the TAKEOVER checkpoint, armed with an M16 rifle and wearing a military vest. Shortly after sunrise, he ambushed the IDF forces at that site, opening fire on 2 soldiers who had just arrived to man the checkpoint. He then approached the open door and fired into the rooms of the outpost, while the soldiers inside returned fire. Meanwhile, a rapid response team was dispatched to the scene, and an exchange of fire ensued between them and the terrorists who tried to escape but was unable to after being wounded by a fragmentation grenade and gunfire directed at him by the soldiers. He was later determined to have succumbed to his wounds, but he managed to kill 2 of the soldiers in the outpost from Battalion 8211 of the Ephraim Regional Brigade and wound 8 others, including 2 who were severely wounded. Helicopters were immediately dispatched to evacuate the wounded, and the military is now investigating how the soldiers guarding the outpost did not detect the terrorist as he arrived at the site at night and hid till the sun was up. His identity is also not yet known to the security establishment. After the incident, Palestinian media reported that a UAV attacked the town of Tamun near the Taysir checkpoint. According to the report, there were no casualties. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on what is happening in Israel, so make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel TBN Israel if you haven't already, and receive daily boots-on-the-ground updates from Israel. Our mission is to share the truth and pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And now, we will hear from TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani about the White House summit between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump on Tuesday. The main topics of discussion were a settlement in Gaza and a regional agreement. The goals: rebuilding the Gaza Strip, removing Hamas, and promoting normalization with Arab countries while reducing Iran's influence. How is it going to happen in reality? And what was agreed upon in this historic meeting? We'll hear from Mati Shoshani.
Thank you, Yair. Since the first day Trump entered office, and actually over a month beforehand, his team was already leaking information. They had been promising us to change the situation here in the Gaza Strip and the Middle East. What does that mean? They committed to pushing through a deal that would, one, release the hostages in this area and bring a sustainable agreement between Israel, the Palestinians, and the Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and something bigger for the region. And what we're experiencing is exactly that. We're seeing the Trump administration, as he meets with Prime Minister Netanyahu, talk about something that is completely unheard of and honestly unexpected for everyone in this region. They're talking about a relocation of the population of the Gaza Strip, one, to better their lives, and two, to rehabilitate and to rebuild the region. And then we'll get into deeper details later on in this segment, talking about their shift of power balance and agenda in the Middle East as a larger picture. So let's start with number one. What is the Trump administration floating? If you've been tracking with the news, last night, Israel time, and yesterday in the afternoon, American time, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu meet, and they come up with a new plan that is presented to the public. And the plan is, we're going to relocate 1.8 million of the inhabitants of the Gaza Strip, which are roughly 2-point-something million people, relocate them to other neighboring countries with the purpose of rebuilding the Gaza Strip. But here's where it gets interesting. When Trump is asked, what will those people do after we rebuild the Gaza Strip? He said, well, that's really complicated. Some of them might return, some of them might not return. And right now, the situation is so bad in the Gaza Strip that we don't see people remaining there while we try to rebuild the region. The biggest headline of this entire piece is the U.S. government direct involvement. The word boots on the ground is a relevant word here. We're talking about U.S. forces, be they military or military contractors, that will operate within the Gaza Strip to stabilize and then rebuild the area. And this answers one really big question, the question that's been floating in the heads of everyone involved in the negotiations of the day after for the Gaza Strip, which is how to remove Hamas and yet guarantee some kind of civil government in that region moving forward. So far, the minute Israeli troops withdrew from the Gaza Strip, Hamas retook control over civilian life. They are the de facto government. And for everyone involved, specifically Israel, that is simply not something we're able to live with. We have to have a different government in the Gaza Strip. This offer made by the Trump administration completely flips this on the head. So President Trump presents this very, very utopic picture. A perfect scenario where Hamas and some of the inhabitants of the Gaza Strip are removed, I should say much of them are removed, and a future plan for almost an oasis in the Middle East is built in the Gaza Strip. By the way, this is not the first time this idea is floated. For many years and many different iterations, other countries have proposed the idea of turning the Gaza Strip into a hub of trade, a hub of tech, a hub of industry in this region. And it even has the resources to do that. It has access to the sea, it could build a substantial port, it has population that is looking for work, it has a young population that could be trained up for industry and other trades. So the conditions are there, the infrastructure and the leadership have never been there. It's going to be a very, very challenging task to do this. It involves the U.S. bringing in personnel onto the ground into this region. And more importantly, it brings in direct aid and involvement of multiple other countries in the region. Who are we talking about? So you have the Qataris that have been part of almost every discussion so far. You have the Egyptians that have been part of every discussion so far. You have the Saudis that are the newcomers onto this stage of bringing a new superpower into Middle Eastern discussions. President Trump says something else that's really interesting. He says this: the U.S. isn't paying for this. In other words, they've probably already had discussions and conversations with several other kingdoms in the Gulf area, countries that are rich with oil and resources and want to have involvement in this region. They want influence in this region. Human consideration aside, and the fact that this is complex and logistically almost impossible when you think about it, it actually makes sense. The big question on the table of how we remove Hamas and how we do something that doesn't involve a terrorist organization that has brought only destruction and death to its population for decades, the U.S. government involvement seems to be the best path for exactly that plan. You have to hand it to President Trump. You have to hand it to the Netanyahu administration for thinking way outside of the box. I don't think anyone saw this coming to this extent, and I have to wear a hat, but I take off my hat before them and say, look, this is creative thinking. This is thinking outside of the box. This is pushing for something to better the lives and the situation of people, not just in the short term, but in the long term. One other thing that really is important to note here is that this actually ties into the hostage situation in the Gaza Strip. Because right now, the negotiation has been, well, we're letting the Hamas control, and we're trying to figure out what we can give them in return for the hostages. And President Trump puts a whole different discussion on the table. He dumps it on the table and says, if you don't give us those hostages, and if the ceasefire doesn't hold, we're coming in with full force. We'll bring in violence that you didn't expect before. The U.S. is willing to be directly involved. Not only that, we're willing to come in and scoop you all out, get you out of the country, and place a different government entirely instead of you. And if you think about Hamas hearing that level of negotiation, they know he means business. They know the Israeli government under Prime Minister Netanyahu is very, very trigger happy at the moment to do almost anything that will bring back the hostages quickly without having to go into another round of violence. So in that sense, this very counterintuitive, this very surprising, this very out-of-the-box thought process seems to actually make a whole lot of sense, specifically if we're talking about weakening Hamas and bringing something better for a hostage release and for the people of the Gaza Strip. This isn't something they came up with the day that Netanyahu landed in Washington. They thought about this in advance, they prepped, they had meetings across the Israeli government and the US government, and there's a bigger picture that they're moving into place here that isn't just the Gaza Strip. They've thought of the Gaza Strip in the day after, they've thought of Judea and Samaria in the day after, they've thought of how they're going to rebuild and work with the Palestinian Authority, working hand in hand with the Israeli government, and then the big picture is they've thought of the regional next piece, which is Abraham Accords Phase 2. They've thought of the Saudi involvement, they've thought of how they're pulling in other countries, they've thought of the sanction package that's going to be imposed on the Iranians. So when they're coming to this discussion, they have, the expression, you have a carrot and a stick in either hand. They've come with a whole package of carrots and a whole package of sticks to bring everyone together and move very quickly to a different kind of solution in this region. If you ask if this is good or bad news, the answer is wholeheartedly, yes, this is good news. Having someone who's willing to do something unexpected to promote peace and a resolution of what's going on here is good for Israel, it's good for the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, for the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, and it's good for regional stability. And by extension, it's good for the people of Iran, for the people of Lebanon, for the people of Syria, who've been under the brunt and the influence, only negative, of the Iranian Islamic regime. So however you turn this story and unexpected turn of events, it's a positive thing for the people of this region. So elements of this program and idea have been floated by the Trump administration and him in person for the last 2 weeks, give or take. And every time he floated these ideas, the Egyptian government and the Jordanian government responded strongly in the most negative sense possible. We will not, we cannot, this will not happen. And Trump continues to say, it will happen. We've done a lot for these people. They will come around to it. This region depends on the influx of U.S. cash. The Egyptian government needs the US to back them. The Jordanian government needs US military and financial support, as does the Israeli, by the way. So the US does have the power to do something that people are saying will not happen. One big piece that remains on the table and is not resolved yet is the question of the Israeli hostages held by Hamas. Some of them are alive, some of them are dead. But the big issue here is the fact that phase 2 of the agreement, which ends sometime in the next couple of weeks with the exchange of the last 3 batches of hostages, will come into play when Israel and Hamas are supposed to reach a more substantial and long-term ceasefire. We haven't seen that yet. There are no parameters for that agreement, and hopefully this discussion between the US and Israel will loop in a conversation that includes the long-term ceasefire and the release of the remaining hostages. We know, and everyone else in this region knows, that Israel will not be able to move on without seeing the full release of our hostages. Anyway, we're going to be tracking with this idea as it progresses because we're sure to hear more about this. And now back to Yair Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in this story, so you can know the truth and pray for the situation. If you want to receive daily boots-on-the-ground updates from Israel, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at TBN Israel. Since October 7th, Israel has faced devastating destruction. Thousands of rockets have scarred the land, and over 57,000 acres of forests have been lost. But now, we have an opportunity to restore and rebuild. As we approach Tu B'Shvat, the holiday of planting and renewal, we invite you to take part in a movement of hope and healing. Every tree we are planting represents resilience, faith, and renewal. These trees will rise from the ashes, standing tall as symbols of Israel's strength and determination. Now, it's time for you to take part in this effort. So please go to www.tbn.org/rebuildisrael and make a contribution that will help sow the seeds for a better tomorrow. Your support will directly help replant the land and renew the future of Israel, because love is stronger than hate. Faith is stronger than destruction, and together we will rebuild Israel with God's grace. Thank you, and now let's get back to the news. Turkey's President Erdogan met on Tuesday with Syria's interim president El-Julani to discuss the establishment of 2 Turkish Air Force bases in central Syria. They also discussed training the new Syrian army and protecting Syria's airspace. This is according to sources that are familiar with the details. Ankara seeks to play a central role in the new Syria and fill the vacuum left by Iran, Assad's main ally. This move could spark rivalry with Arab Gulf states and greatly concern the state of Israel. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on every development on Israel's northern border with Syria. Stay tuned to the truth, keep praying, share, and click that subscribe button. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Hamas spokesperson Abdul Latif El-Qannoua declared on Tuesday that talks have begun for the second phase of the hostage deal and the ceasefire. According to the statement, which was quoted by several Arab media portals, talks and negotiations for the second phase have begun, and we are concerned and focused on the current stage of shelter, aid, and reconstruction for our people in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, senior Hamas official abroad, Mahmoud Mardawi, stated that the organization is committed to the agreement and will enter negotiations for the second phase of the deal. However, the IDF was forced to fire warning shots at multiple suspected individuals, both on foot and in vehicles, who posed a threat in Gaza over recent days. Additionally, Israeli Navy surveillance identified boats that violated the security restrictions in Gaza's maritime area, prompting initial warning fire. When the vessels failed to retreat, additional fire was directed at them, ultimately forcing them to return to shore. Furthermore, in central Gaza, IDF forces fired at 2 suspects who posed an immediate threat. After they failed to withdraw, the soldiers engaged again, resulting in confirmed hits against the targets. Additionally, forces operating in the area fired warning shots in multiple locations across the Gaza Strip to deter suspects approaching their positions and posing a threat. The IDF remains determined to fully uphold the terms of the agreement to secure the release of the hostages. The military is prepared for any scenario and will continue taking all necessary actions to eliminate immediate threats to the IDF soldiers. For its part, Hamas continues to use deception and manipulation in its handling of the hostage deal. Additionally, Israeli security officials report that Hamas is classifying civilians, including elderly individuals, as soldiers in order to receive a higher number of terrorists released in the exchange, including those with blood on their hands who are responsible for deadly attacks against Israelis. Senior IDF officials state that defining civilian hostages as soldiers, allegedly because all Israeli citizens are subject to reserve duty in the IDF, is also part of Hamas's propaganda and psychological warfare designed to portray their captives as military personnel rather than innocent civilians. For example, when Hamas released Ofer Calderon, they removed him from the vehicle and placed him on a stage dressed in olive green clothing, intending to falsely present him as a reserve soldier in the IDF rather than a kidnapped civilian of Israel. Yesterday, a senior Hamas official told the Russian news outlet Sputnik that hostage Sasha Trupnov will be released despite being a soldier, even though he is not a soldier at all, but an Israeli high-tech worker. We at TBN Israel have an exclusive interview with his partner, Sapir Cohen, who was kidnapped with him from their home but was released in the first round of the hostage deal. So search for the interview on our YouTube channel, TBN Israel, and keep spreading the truth about what is happening in Israel. We understand that the situation in the Middle East and Israel is very complicated and seems hopeless. It feels like wars will go on forever. At times like this, when I realize that there is nothing that I can do to fix the problem myself, I understand I need to trust in God and pray that He will deliver the solution. And you know what? He always does. He's faithful and powerful, and I've seen so many miracles during this war that I have confidence in Him. He's faithful to the people of Israel, and He's faithful to each and every one of you in anything that you are facing in your lives. So, if you need encouragement in your day-to-day lives, take a look at the miracles that God is performing these days in Israel. We're under attack by multiple enemies, and we are still here, not because of the IDF, but because God is faithful to the people of Israel and to each and every one of you. So what should we do? We should keep spreading the truth, share these videos and what is happening in Israel, and most importantly, we should pray for the situation, because this is a spiritual war. So please pray for the safe return of our hostages that are held by Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip. Pray for their swift and safe release back home. Pray for the soldiers of the IDF that are defending us in the Gaza Strip, in Syria, in Lebanon, and in Judea and Samaria. And most importantly, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and together we will win this war because God is on our side.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.